The Sorceresses of The Witcher are some of the most powerful and intriguing characters in the Witcher lore. They are present in so many aspects of the stories we experience, from advising rulers, to manipulating or assisting witches, to forming secret organizations bent on emphasizing the superiority of magic, and, well, everything in between. But, where do these individuals come from? How do they acquire their unique skill set? And why do they seem to have an affinity for the Witcher Geralt? In today's video, I hope to answer these questions and more by discussing where most of the well-known northern sorceresses started their journey into magic, by discussing the Magical Academy of Aretuza. Aretuza is located in the northern kingdom of Temeria on Thanedd Isle, which is an island located northwest of the port city of Gorsvelen. The actual Isle of Thanedd is connected to the city of Gorsvelen via a bridge. In the books, the isle was described as not really resembling an isle at all. It looked more like a giant stone pole emerging from the waves. But not only that, it was said to be a large ziggurat-type structure encircled by a spiral path, with extra zigzags of stairs and terraces. The terraces were littered with gardens and groves, there were white towers molded into the rock that reached right into the sky, and decorative domes adorned the buildings that were surrounded by galleries. Actually, the entire structure appeared to have been carved into the island, and the way in which this was achieved is said to have been via elven magic, although no one can really recall a time when it wasn't owned by the resident mages, so there's not really much history on if it was actually owned by the elves or not. It's worth understanding that Aretuza is not the entire isle, merely a section of it. The way Thanedd Isle is structured is at the very bottom you have the Palace of Loxia, which is the place most guests are limited to, and only through entering there can you reach the upper terraces that consist of Aretuza, then Garstang Palace further up, and then, at the very top of the isle, Tor Lara, or the Tower of the Gull. Aretuza's section of the isle is described as consisting of 3 overgrown terraces, each containing beautiful groves, ponds, gardens, and when Ciri first sets her eyes upon it in the books, she notes how she doesn't really understand why it doesn't simply fall off the isle. It's safe to say that Aretuza, and in fact the entire Isle of Thanedd, is one of the more surreal places in The Witcher. Aretuza has been described as one of the better defended places in the entire continent, most likely because of its geographical location and the various magical barriers surrounding it and Garstang. As for the actual structure of Aretuza, on top of all the gardens, terraces, etc., there are of course bedrooms, classrooms, a main hall, a place known as the Gallery of Glory, and multiple other wings to the whole complex. The main hall, as stated by Geralt, is in the shape of a large T, with unbelievably high, narrow, stained glass windows. Geralt also estimated that the hall could contain at least 300 people, and that was with all the various tables he could see at the time. As for the Gallery of Glory, it is effectively a gallery of paintings that show the history of magic. Although a lot of these paintings were painted by the students of Aretuza, they still serve as a reminder of the great history magic users possess. Going over all the paintings would take a while, but for example, one of them shows when humans first subdued magic, as well as when this human, John Becker, used this magic to impress and assist early humans. We also see when human children were taken by Geoffrey Monk to Lochmuin in order to learn magic from the elves that live there. There are plenty of other paintings, but I think those examples give you the general idea. I'll also add in this section of the video that Aretuza was founded by the sorceress Clara Larissa de Winter, who was also depicted in one of the paintings, along with 3 others who had each mastered one of the key areas, so fire, water, earth, and air. We know of at least 2 of the rectors of the academy, so pretty much the head of the Aretuza section of Thanedd Isle. And these individuals are Tissaia de Vries and Margarita Lauantile, with the latter having taken over from Tissaia. Although Aretuza appears enchanting and on its face a wondrous place where skills in magic can be acquired, behind closed doors and in its essence, it is designed to act as a prison for its students. When a young girl is admitted to this academy, they are simply not allowed to leave, as long as they wish to learn. This means that despite being in such close proximity to the bustling port city of Gorsvelen, they are never allowed to even walk the streets or see anyone other than their fellow students and tutors. Of course, it is is not a true prison. If someone really wanted to leave, they could. For example, during the Convent, which is basically this sort of gathering of mages, and they go to Aretuza, have a meal. There's a bunch of other stuff that goes on, but it's not very important. But anyway, the adepts were transferred to Loxia, their rooms were used for guests, and during this time, many of them snuck into the city. But I would call that event an exception, as from what I understand, it is completely against the rules to leave. The academy is designed to keep students there, so no going back to see your family on holidays. Once you're there, that is your home until you are pretty much a full-grown woman, unless you want to cut your education short and just leave. The way in which the students of Aretuza are found is a little bit unclear, although it can be assumed that the graduates of the Academy, allied magic users, general friends of the Academy, and I imagine even the graduates of Aretuza's male counterpart, Ban Ard, most likely just happen upon girls with an affinity to magic in their travels, and then simply bring them to Aretuza. And I imagine whoever brings them would most likely cover their fee, or maybe there'd be some sort of system where that person takes out a loan and they have to pay it back later on, sort of thing. It's a little bit confusing, but it is known that students do go there that don't necessarily have a lot of money, they're just gifted in magic, so I'm sure something in regards to the fee that the school charges would be sorted out. I mean, each case will be different. For example, money could exchange hands for the girls, or perhaps the girls are simply taken, as I don't imagine mages would be above that. It is also noted by Dijkstra that at least 100 ladies from some of the best Redanian families are students. This topic is a slightly more controversial one, as a lot of these students, in many mages' eyes, haven't exactly earned their place at Aretuza. Their parents simply had enough money and influence to secure them a place there. For example, it is said in the Witcher book, Season of Storms, to the Lady of the Lake, Nimue, that the entrance exams of Aretuza are very hard. I believe that the staff of Aretuza are encouraged to allow the more fortunate students into the academy regardless of their exam results, because I suppose they want those families on their side and they also probably just want the money. After securing entry, which as mentioned in the Witcher book, Time of Contempt, costs 1200 Novigrad crowns, with a articulation of 200 crowns for new students. The students are taught the general skills you would expect from an expensive education, for example general history, politics, writing skills, etc. I also imagine they'll be taught certain forms of behavior befitting to a sorceress, so manners and all the accompanying social skills. And yes, I know mages can be quite rude, I'm just saying that they will be taught them. The two subjects that are most interesting to me are of course general magic studies and elder speech. I believe the adepts are taught general knowledge in every area of the arcane arts, except the forbidden magics like Goetia, which is demonology, and necromancy, although some adepts do end up learning these magics through other means. General life at the academy is pretty much what you would expect, a lot of studying and a lot of hard work, but on top of that, some students have to go through extra experiences that they may not have initially anticipated. An example of this would be the sorceress Yennefer Vengerberg, who was admitted to the academy under the recommendation of the archmistress at the time, Tessaya de Vries. Yennefer was described as having arrived there physically and mentally abused by her father, as well as basically having no support from her mother. Her father most likely did this because of her half-elven blood and because she had a deformity in the form of a hunchback. Yennefer attempted suicide soon after her admission into Aretuza, but luckily survived. It is noted though that in her first year, her deformity and tendon trauma was corrected through the use of higher magic. Yennefer's final results when leaving the academy were considered excellent. Something I just thought I'd add is in the book Time of Contempt, when Geralt and Yennefer were at Aretuza shortly before the event infamously known as the Thanedd coup, he asked her if when she studied at Aretuza, she slept in a room similar to the room they were lying in, and if she had a doll. Yennefer just stirred violently, said no, and told Geralt twice not to ask her that. So I hope that gives you an idea of how these girls grew up. It's not all bad though. The students, should they complete their full education at Aretuza, will then have gone from being a fairly young girl with little to no knowledge in magic to being an educated, full-grown woman and an expert of magic. Even those that fail are said to often go on to become lawyers or some other form of esteemed job, which gives you an idea of just how much these girls are taught. Anyway, after finishing their, I suppose, main education at Aretuza, many go on to try and gain the title Mistress of Magic. There are many ways to do this. The first is to stay on as an assistant professor, the second is to have a full-time apprenticeship with a mistress, and the last is to become a Dwimvindra, which is pretty much a sorceress who practices on the road. The first two are pretty self-explanatory. You just study under others and eventually take an exam which, if you pass, awards you the title. As for the final option, effectively you would go out into the world as a sorceress and learn through actually participating in the world. After some time, if you feel ready, you can then take on the exam to earn the title. Dwimvindras do also receive something known as a stipend fund from Aretuza, basically a recurring fixed sum of money that will cover varying expenses, so maybe eating or staying somewhere, just that sort of thing. At the point of becoming a Mistress of Magic, some go on to become advisors to the various rulers of the Northern Kingdoms, some decide to go and pursue their own endeavours, and some simply become tutors at Aretuza for the next generation of sorceresses. Just to give you an idea, to list some of the more famous Aretuza sorceresses, there is Yennefer of Vengerberg, Triss Merigold, Philippa Eilhart, Kira Metz, Margarita Loantila, Tisaya de Vries, and honestly, just many other famous sorceresses. Something that I find quite interesting is that Aretuza is considered more highly esteemed than its male counterpart, Ban Ard. In fact, it's been joked that Ban Ard is more known for its banner than its sorcerer's school. Margarita goes slightly more in depth with the relationship between the two institutes in the books, claiming that at Aretuza they constantly compare the results of their students with those of Ban Ard, and invariably the comparison falls in favour of the female students. Margarita personally puts this down to magic requiring patience, delicacy, common sense, and tenacity. She then goes on to say that magic requires an individual to be patient and humbly accept their setbacks and failures. She believes that the male students do not excel in some of these areas, as the majority of them are focusing too much on the impossible and unattainable, and their ambition is too great to actually focus on what is just possible. The Academy, as of the start of The Witcher 3, was destroyed by Radovid V, with most of the adepts, graduates, and staff killed. In fact, pretty much all of the staff and adepts were killed, even those that tried to escape, such as the adepts that Margarita tried to flee with. They were captured by King Radovid's men, thrown into Deirad prison, and executed. I mean, Margarita only survived as I believe Radovid wanted her to see all of her students die one by one and sort of torture her, and then leave her for last. The remnants of Aretuza now only consist of a few sorceresses, like Yennefer, Triss, Philippa, and Margarita. It is certainly up for debate as to what ultimately happens to this academy should you choose to kill Radovid in The Witcher 3. Of course, Margarita, the last rector of the academy, survived, so perhaps if Radovid dies, she rebuilds it, but based on the fact all of Aretuza's books and buildings were said to have been burned to the ground, whilst the priests of the Eternal Fire announced to all that this was the fate that awaited all mages, I don't imagine she would really want to return there. We have now come to the end of today's video on Aretuza, and I hope you have either learnt something new about this sorcerer's school you didn't know, or at least enjoyed yourself. Oh yeah, also for anyone wondering about why sorceresses seem to like Geralt, pretty much he has a longer than normal lifespan, they only really know very arrogant male sorcerers that could be their realistic partners, and as a witcher, a lot of them just find him fascinating. Also, I mean, come on guys, it is Geralt. But that's it for today's video. I hope you've all enjoyed, and if you want to support me in this sort of content, I'd really appreciate a like. It just lets me know you enjoyed it and all the rest. Be sure to comment your thoughts on this academy. You know, is Ban Ard better? Would you like to see Aretuza in a future Witcher game? All that sort of stuff. Get on Twitter, give me a follow. Get on Twitch, give me a follow. Links for all of this are in the description on the channel page. And I also just want everyone to thank the Patreon pledges. They donate to me when they don't really need to, and it's pretty kind, so thanks to those guys. You guys are awesome. I really do appreciate that. Thanks to anyone who does any of this stuff. It is just like an extra thing that I do appreciate you doing, as it does help out, and just thanks for that, guys. Anyway, that's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Have an awesome rest of the week.